The rhetoric in the Persian Gulf just reached a terminal velocity. Yesterday, Supreme Leader Ali Khamenei issued a direct, chilling ultimatum to President Trump. The USS Gerald R. Ford, a $13 billion marvel of American engineering, is nothing more than a target that can be sent to the bottom of the sea. But behind the fiery speech lies a terrifying technical question. Does Tehran actually possess a secret weapon capable of piercing the world's most advanced naval shield? Today, we analyze the fatal threat, and the hidden technology Iran claims will turn the Ford into a 100,000-ton tomb. Hard cut to title card, bold white on black. Khamenei's fatal threat. We can sink the USS Ford, Iran's secret weapon revealed. The threat, the unrecoverable slap. 2D map of the Persian Gulf appears. The map shows Iran's southern coastline, the Strait of Hormuz, and the waters of the Gulf of Oman. A red zone is highlighted near the strait, labeled Forward Projected Arrival Zone, Feb 1921. Bandar Abbas. Naval base is marked on the Iranian coast. The map is clean, professional, with nautical distance markers. Let's start with context, because Khamenei's threat did not materialize out of nowhere. It is the product of a week that has seen diplomatic collapse, military positioning, and rhetorical escalation reach levels unseen since the lead-up to Operation Midnight Hammer in June 2025. On February 16th and 17th, just 2 days ago, Iran's Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps naval forces conducted live fire drills in the Strait of Hormuz. Not training exercises, not routine maneuvers, live fire drills. The exercises included anti-ship missile launches, drone swarm operations, and what the IRGC publicly described as carrier interdiction scenarios. At the exact same time, the nuclear talks in Geneva, which had been ongoing since early February, reached what multiple sources are now describing as a terminal stalemate. The American delegation, led by Steve Witkoff, issued a 12-hour ultimatum demanding that Iran halt all uranium enrichment during negotiations. Iran refused. The talks collapsed. The American convoy left Geneva on February 17th at 12:04 p.m. local time. Within hours, Khamenei delivered his speech in Tehran. The phrase he used, the one that has since been repeated in every Western intelligence briefing on the Persian Gulf, was the unrecoverable slap. That is the term, not a metaphor, a doctrinal phrase. It appears in IRGC strategic literature. It refers to a strike so decisive, so psychologically and materially devastating, that the adversary cannot respond proportionally, because the very symbol of their power has been removed from the board. The American carrier is not a weapon, it is a target. More dangerous than the carrier is the weapon that can send it to the depths. Supreme Leader Ali Khamenei, Feb 17, 2026. Khamenei is not threatening just a ship, he is threatening the symbol. The USS Gerald R. Ford is not merely a piece of military hardware. It is a $13 billion statement of American technological superiority and global reach. It is the centerpiece of the most powerful naval force ever assembled. Its arrival in the Persian Gulf, which multiple sources confirm is scheduled for February 19th to 21st, is designed to be a message in itself. The United States can project overwhelming force anywhere, at any time, and there is nothing you can do to stop it. Khamenei's speech is a direct challenge to that message. He is saying, we can stop it, and we can do it in a way that will be broadcast on every screen in the world. The sinking of a U.S. supercarrier in the Persian Gulf would not be a tactical loss. It would be a civilizational humiliation, the kind of event that reshapes the geopolitical order for decades. It would be Pearl Harbor, but compressed into a single afternoon and broadcast live on social media. The question, the only question that matters, is whether Iran has the technical capability to do what Khamenei is claiming. Because if they don't, this is bluster. And if they do, this is the most dangerous moment in U.S.-Iran relations since the 1979 hostage crisis. The intelligence, why now? The February 6th, omen, reset, failure. To understand why Khamenei made this threat now, why this week, why this moment, you need to understand what happened 2 weeks ago in Oman. Oman has historically served as the quiet intermediary between Washington and Tehran. It is one of the few Gulf states that maintains diplomatic relations with Iran and is trusted, to varying degrees, by both sides. When direct use of the non-negotiable Iran communication breaks down, messages move through Muscat. On February 6th, according to sources familiar with the diplomatic traffic, the Trump administration sent a senior envoy, identity not publicly disclosed, to Muscat to deliver what was described as a final framework for a nuclear deal. The framework, according to the limited details that have leaked, was extraordinarily generous by historical standards, full sanctions, relief, normalized trade relations, and security guarantees, in exchange for immediate verifiable dismantlement of Iran's enrichment infrastructure and permanent international monitoring. The Iranian response, delivered through Oman's foreign ministry, was a flat rejection. Not a counteroffer, not a request for modifications, a rejection. This is what diplomats are now calling the Oman reset failure, the moment when the last serious back-channel effort to avoid a military confrontation collapsed. And it is the backdrop against which everything that has happened since, the Geneva walkout, the live fire drills, Khamenei's speech, must be understood. The USS intelligence assessment, based on intercepts and human intelligence sources inside Iran, is that Tehran's leadership believes the military balance has shifted. Not permanently, not decisively, but enough to create a window, a narrow, fleeting window, in which Iran can credibly threaten a U.S. carrier strike group and force Washington to reconsider its approach. The reason for that belief comes down to two specific technological developments that have occurred over the past 6 months. The Chinese YLC-8B anti-stealth radar 3D rendering of a large truck-mounted radar system, the YLC-8B. It is a phased array radar with a distinctive diamond-shaped antenna configuration. The graphic shows multiple radar beams emanating from the system, scanning the sky in overlapping patterns. In late December 2025, satellite imagery confirmed the arrival of at least 2 Chinese YLC-8B radar systems at an IRGC facility near Bandar Abbas. The YLC-8B is not just another radar. It is specifically designed as an anti-stealth long-range detection system. It operates in the VHF and UHF frequency bands, lower frequencies than most modern combat radars, which makes it significantly more effective at detecting stealth aircraft and, critically, low observable cruise missiles. Why does this matter? Because the U.S. Navy's carrier strike defense is built around layered stealth. The assumption is that by the time an adversary knows a carrier is in a given area, American aircraft, F-35Cs, EA-18G Growlers, have already established air superiority and suppressed enemy radar networks. The YLC-8B disrupts that assumption. It can see what it is not supposed to see. Iran has positioned these radars along the southern coast of the Persian Gulf, giving them overlapping coverage of the Strait of Hormuz and the approaches to the Gulf of Oman. The Ford, when it enters the strait, will be operating inside the YLC-8B detection envelope. The IRGC will know where it is. They will know its speed, its heading, and its aircraft activity patterns. The element of surprise, a core component of carrier operations, is significantly degraded. The Khorramshahr R-4, an underground launch tube's cross-section diagram of an underground missile silo. The Khorramshahr 4 missile is shown vertically inside the silo, a large liquid-fueled ballistic missile with a warhead section that detaches into multiple independent re-entry vehicles. Labels indicate range 2,000 kilometers, payload 1,500 kilocalories, launch time 5 minutes. The second development is more concerning. The Khorramshahr 4 is a long-range ballistic missile derived from Iranian reverse engineering of North Korean Musadan missile technology. It has a range of approximately 2,000 kilometers and can carry a 1,500 kilogram payload. But what makes the Khorramshahr 4 particularly dangerous in the context of anti-carrier operations is not its range or its payload. It is the fact that Iran has moved multiple Khorramshahr 4 systems into hardened underground launch tubes along the coast of the Persian Gulf. These are not mobile launchers that can be tracked and targeted. These are fixed installations, buried deep enough to survive anything short of a direct hit by a bunker-buster bomb, and positioned in sites that have overlapping fields of fire across the strait. The launch tubes are designed for rapid-fire sequences. The missile can be fueled, armed, and launched in under 5 minutes from the moment the decision is made. Why does this matter for the Ford? A ballistic missile descending at terminal velocity, traveling at speeds exceeding Mach 10 in its final phase, presents an extraordinarily difficult intercept problem for a carrier strike group's Aegis defense system. The SM-6 interceptor missiles that the Ford's escorts carry are capable of ballistic missile defense, but the intercept window is measured in seconds, and the probability of a successful intercept against a salvo of multiple missiles simultaneously is significantly lower than against a single target. Iran does not need to sink the Ford with a single missile. It needs to overwhelm the Ford's defenses with enough missiles, launched quickly enough that at least one gets through. One hit on a carrier, even a non-nuclear hit, could kill hundreds of sailors, cripple the ship's operational capability, and create a catastrophic loss of face for the United States. Trump's response, the Ford as enforcer. On Friday, February 14th, just 4 days ago, President Trump made a statement at a rally in South Carolina that was deliberately designed to escalate the rhetorical confrontation. The Ford is my enforcer. It enforces deals. It enforces reality. And it's heading to the Gulf to enforce a decision Tehran is going to have to make. That statement, the Ford is my enforcer, was interpreted by Iran's leadership as a direct threat, not a vague warning, a direct operational threat. The carrier was being positioned not as a defensive asset, but as the leading edge of a potential military strike package. Khamenei's speech 2 days later was a response to Trump's statement. It was an attempt to flip the script, to transform the Ford from an enforcer into a target, to shift the psychological dynamic from American strength to American vulnerability. Whether that shift succeeds depends entirely on whether the technology Iran is claiming to have can do what Khamenei says it can do. The tech breakdown, the saturation, secret, how to kill a supercarrier clean technical diagram, cross-section of a Ford-class aircraft carrier showing its compartmentalized structure. Each compartment is labeled flight deck, hangar deck, engineering spaces, magazines, crew quarters. Title, 100,000 tons of compartmentalized steel. Let's begin with a fundamental fact. You cannot sink a Ford-class aircraft carrier with a single missile. It is not physically possible. The ship displaces over 100,000 tons. Its hull is divided into hundreds of watertight compartments. Its design is based on lessons learned from every naval engagement since World War II. A single anti-ship missile, even a modern high-explosive warhead traveling at supersonic speed, will penetrate the hull, cause localized damage, potentially start fires, potentially kill crew members in the immediate blast radius, but it will not sink the ship. Aircraft carriers are designed to absorb punishment. They are designed to take hits and keep functioning. The USS Forrestal survived a catastrophic fire and explosions in 1967 that killed 134 sailors and destroyed 21 aircraft, and it was repaired and returned to service. The USS Enterprise survived a similar incident in 1969. Carriers are survivable. So if a single missile cannot sink a carrier, how do you sink one? The answer is saturation. The saturation attack doctrine. Animation. A carrier strike group in the center of the screen. Surrounding it are multiple rings of defense. Aegis destroyers, missile interceptors, electronic warfare coverage. Then, from multiple directions, simultaneously, dozens of red dots appear. Missiles, drones, threats converging on the group from all angles at once. A saturation attack is exactly what it sounds like. You launch so many threats from so many different vectors at so many different speeds and altitudes that the defender's systems are overwhelmed. The Aegis combat system on a U.S. Navy destroyer can track and engage dozens of targets simultaneously, but it cannot engage hundreds of targets simultaneously. There is a ceiling. There's a limit to how many interceptor missiles can be launched, how many fire control radars can be allocated, how many targeting solutions can be computed in real time. Once that ceiling is exceeded, once the number of inbound threats surpasses the number of available defensive responses, the system saturates. And once it saturates, things start getting through. The Soviet Union developed saturation attack doctrine during the Cold War specifically to counter American carrier strike groups. The concept was simple. If you cannot defeat the defenses with superior technology, defeat them with superior numbers. Launch 100 missiles at once. The carrier group will shoot down 90, maybe 95. But 5 will get through, and 5 is enough. Iran has studied this doctrine extensively, and over the past decade they have built an entire military-industrial infrastructure around the concept of overwhelming American defenses with sheer volume. The question is not whether Iran has the missiles. They do. The question is whether they can coordinate a saturation attack, launch everything at once from multiple locations in a way that the Ford's defenses cannot handle. That is where the so-called secret weapon comes in. The Fatah II. Hypersonic missile 3D animation of the Fatah II missile in flight. Sleek, dart-like profile. Maneuvering fins near the nose. Graphic overlay shows. Speed, Mach 15. Range, 1,400 kilometers. Reaction time for defender, 90 seconds. The Fatah II is Iran's first operational hypersonic missile. Announced in November 2023, it entered service, according to IRGC public statements, in mid-2025. The missile is based on a maneuverable re-entry vehicle design, similar in concept to China's DF-17 and Russia's Avangard systems, but significantly smaller and shorter range. The Fatah II travels at approximately Mach 15 during its terminal phase. That is 15 times the speed of sound. That is roughly 11,000 miles per hour. At that speed, the time between detection and impact, the window during which a defender can identify the threat, compute a targeting solution, launch an interceptor, and guide it to intercept, is less than 90 seconds. 90 seconds is not a long time. The Aegis system can theoretically engage hypersonic targets. The SM-6 Block IB interceptor has been tested against hypersonic profiles in controlled conditions. But tested in controlled conditions is not the same as proven effective in combat against multiple simultaneous threats in an environment filled with electronic jamming, decoys, and coordinated attacks. The success rate drops dramatically when the target is not only hypersonic, but also maneuvering, changing trajectory mid-flight to evade predicted intercept points. Iran reportedly has a limited stockpile of Fatah II missiles. Estimates range from 20 to 50 operational units. That is not enough to conduct a full saturation attack on its own, but it is enough to serve as the tip of the spear, the high-speed threat that forces the carrier group's defenses to react instantly, depleting interceptor missiles and radar time, while the slower, less sophisticated threats close in behind. The Iris Shahid Bagheri drone carrier. Satellite photo of the Iris Shahid Bagheri, Iran's largest naval vessel, a forward basing and sea control ship. Then a 3D animation showing the ship's deck opening to reveal rows of small quadcopter-style drones stacked in launch racks. Each drone has a compact explosive payload attached. This is the piece of the puzzle that Western analysts only began to fully understand in late 2025. The Iris Shahid Bagheri is Iran's largest naval vessel, technically classified as a forward-based ship, but functionally serving as a drone carrier. The ship can carry, launch, and recover hundreds of small unmanned aerial systems, drones. Not the large, sophisticated drones like the Shahed 136 that Russia has used in Ukraine. These are smaller, cheaper, expendable. Each drone is essentially a flying explosive, a small quadcopter or fixed-wing design with a 10 to 20 kilogram explosive payload attached. Individually, they are not a serious threat to a warship. Individually, they can be shot down by close-in weapon systems, the Phalanx CIWS, the CRAM launchers, without much difficulty. But Iran does not plan to launch them individually. The Shahid Bagheri can launch swarms, dozens, potentially hundreds of drones simultaneously. And here's why that matters in the context of carrier defense. Every drone that appears on radar is a target that has to be evaluated, tracked, and engaged. The Aegis system does not distinguish between a $500 suicide drone and a $3 million anti-ship missile until it has devoted computational resources to identifying it. By the time the system realizes the threat is low value, it has already spent time, radar bandwidth, and potentially interceptor missiles responding to it. This is what military analysts call digital noise. The drones are not meant to sink the carrier. They are meant to blind the carrier's defenses, to flood the radar picture with so many targets that the system cannot distinguish between the decoys and the real threats. And while the Aegis system is busy tracking and engaging $100, $500 drones, the Fatah-2 hypersonic missiles, the real kill mechanisms, are already in flight, descending at Mach 15 with less than 90 seconds to intercept. This is the saturation secret. It is not one weapon. It is a coordinated package. Drones to create noise, ballistic missiles from underground silos to create volume, and hypersonic missiles to create speed. The defender has to respond to all of it at once. And if the response is not perfect, if even one or two threats get through, the consequences are catastrophic. Warning. The U.S. Navy has never faced a coordinated saturation attack of this scale in actual combat. All current doctrine is based on simulations, war games, and controlled exercises. The real-world performance of Aegis against a live multi-vector saturation strike is unknown. The geopolitical so what? The deterrence deadlock split screen. Left. Simulation of a missile strike on a carrier. Explosions, fire, chaos. Right. A map of the Middle East with multiple strike vectors emanating from U.S. bases and carriers converging on Iran. The visual contrast between what happens if Iran strikes first versus what happens if the U.S. responds. Here is the strategic dilemma that has trapped both sides in what analysts are calling the deterrence deadlock. If Iran attempts a strike against the USS Gerald R. Ford, if they launch the saturation attack, if they fire the Fatah-2 missiles, if they deploy the drone swarms, and if that strike succeeds, even partially, the immediate U.S. response will be overwhelming. We're not talking about a limited retaliation. We're talking about Operation Midnight Hammer 2. Zero, a comprehensive multi-day air campaign that does not stop at the nuclear sites. Every IRGC naval base, every missile launch facility, every radar installation, every command and control node. The response would be, in Trump's own phrasing, traumatic. Iran knows this. Tehran's military leadership is not delusional. They understand that any attack on a U.S. carrier would trigger a response that could effectively end Iran as a functional military power for a generation. The question is whether they believe the political and symbolic value of sinking an American carrier, of delivering the unrecoverable slap, is worth the cost of that response. On the other side of the deadlock is the United States. If the Ford enters the Persian Gulf, and if it does so while the threat of a saturation attack is credible, then the U.S. is placing a $13 billion asset and 5,000 American sailors inside a potential kill zone. The risk calculation becomes, is the symbolic value of having the carrier in the Gulf, the message it sends, the deterrent effect it is supposed to have, worth the possibility, however small, that Iran actually follows through on Khamenei's threat? Because if the S decides the risk is too high. If the forward stays outside the strait, if it operates from the Gulf of Oman or the North Arabian Sea instead of entering the confined waters of the Persian Gulf, then Khamenei has already won the psychological war. He has demonstrated that the American carrier, for all its technological superiority, can be deterred, that it can be kept at bay, that the symbol of American power is, in fact, vulnerable. This is the deadlock. Iran cannot afford to strike because the retaliation would be catastrophic. The U.S. cannot afford not to enter the Gulf because staying out would be an admission of vulnerability. And yet both sides are now locked into positions where backing down means losing credibility. The Strait of Hormuz closure scenario. Map of the Strait of Hormuz with shipping lanes marked. A red overlay appears, closed. Then a graphic of an oil price ticker rapidly climbing. 85 barrel, 100 barrel, 120 barrel. There's a third factor in this deadlock that neither side can ignore: oil. Approximately 20% of the world's oil supply, roughly 21 million barrels per day, transits the Strait of Hormuz. It is the single most critical energy choke point on the planet. If the strait closes, even temporarily, even for a few days, the global oil price will spike instantly. Estimates from energy analysts range from $120 to $150 per barrel within 48 hours of a closure. Iran knows this. It is one of their few genuine leverage points. If a military confrontation begins, Iran's immediate response will almost certainly include an attempt to close or significantly disrupt traffic through the strait. That does not require sinking the ford. It requires mining the waterway, threatening commercial shipping with drones and fast attack boats, and creating an environment where insurance companies refuse to cover vessels transiting the area. A closure of the Strait of Hormuz, even a brief one, would have immediate, measurable economic consequences globally. Stock markets would react, fuel prices would rise, supply chains would tighten. The political pressure on the Trump administration to resolve the crisis quickly, either through military force or through emergency diplomacy, would be immense. This is why the deadlock is so dangerous. It is not just about the carrier. It is not just about Iran's nuclear program. It is about the global economy, the flow of energy, the stability of the entire Middle East region. A miscalculation by either side, a strike launched based on faulty intelligence, a defensive action misinterpreted as aggression, could spiral into a conflict that neither side actually wants, but that both sides feel compelled to continue once it starts. The conclusion. Summary of the board. Clean war room graphic. 2 watch items. The tone is analytical, not sensational. Here's the board. 2 items to watch in the next 48 hours. The Geneva deadline, Feb 19. The official deadline for the Geneva talks. The point at which both sides have agreed there is no further room for negotiation is February 19th. That is tomorrow. If the talks officially collapse tomorrow with no joint statement, no framework agreement, no extension, then the Ford's entry into the Strait of Hormuz becomes almost inevitable. The carrier is already en route. Its arrival window is February 19th to 21st. A diplomatic collapse removes the last reason to delay. Watch for any announcement from Geneva. If there is silence, if there is no statement at all, thinking about that is the signal that the diplomatic window has closed. Bandar Abbas, satellite feeds. Bandar Abbas is Iran's primary naval base on the Persian Gulf. It is home to the IRGCN, the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps Navy, and their fleet of fast attack boats, the small, highly maneuverable vessels that Iran uses for asymmetric naval operations. In the hours before any potential strike, the IRGCN will move its forces into position. Specifically, watch for movement of the so-called swarming gunboats into the northern lane of the Strait of Hormuz. These are the small craft that would be used to harass and threaten commercial shipping. If satellite imagery shows a sudden concentration of IRGCN vessels near the strait, if the boats that are normally dispersed along the coast are all moving to the same location at the same time, that is a prepositioning move. That is Iran preparing to act. Khamenei says he has the weapon to sink the USS Gerald R. Ford. Trump says he has the will to use the Ford as an enforcer, to position it in the Persian Gulf as a demonstration of American power and a guarantee that any nuclear deal will be backed by the most advanced military force the world has ever seen. One of them is bluffing. The problem is that in the next 48 hours, we may find out which one, and the cost of that discovery could be measured in thousands of lives, billions of dollars in economic damage, and a reshaping of the global order that neither Washington nor Tehran fully anticipated. The technical capability exists. Iran has the missiles, they have the drones, they have the radar. Whether they have the coordination, the command and control infrastructure, and the operational discipline to execute a saturation attack against the most heavily defended naval asset in human history is an open question. It has never been tested. It has never been tried. But the fact that it is even a question, the fact that serious defense analysts are sitting in Pentagon briefing rooms, gaming out scenarios where a U.S. supercarrier is struck and potentially disabled by a regional power using asymmetric tactics, tells you how much the strategic landscape has shifted over the past decade. The Ford is en route. Khamenei has issued his threat. Trump has doubled down. The Geneva deadline is tomorrow. And somewhere in the Arabian Sea, 5,000 American sailors are about to find out whether the defenses they have trained on, the systems they have tested in exercises, the doctrine they have studied in classrooms, whether any of it works when the real missiles start flying. We will know soon.